So I'm currently at a building that used to be a Lifeway and is, well, now not. Yeah, it's a Spirit of Halloween store. I'm getting decorations for a video that I'm shooting. So, yeah, that's where we're headed next. It's time to mask up. I want to wake up in a city that never sleeps and find I'm number one. You think I could pull this off? This is wild.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
Tut-tut, looks like rain. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome yet again to another installment of Movie Club. I'm realizing just right now how terrible of an idea it was to wear this for an entire video, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it right now. But welcome back. I've missed you in the week that we've been apart, and I am glad that you've returned yet again to see another movie with us. This week, since it's the last week we'll meet before September ends and October spoopy season begins, I kind of wanted to do a movie that towed the line between pre-October and spooky season. And what better film than Laika's incredible stop-motion animated film based on Neil Gaiman's book, Coraline, from 2009, directed by Henry Selick. Now, you might have seen Selick's work elsewhere, because he has directed prior to this just a little film that you can screen twice a year and is perfect for just everything. And if you grew up in the age that I did, Hot Topic had a bajillion shirts from this movie. I'm talking, of course, about The Nightmare Before Christmas, the Tim Burton story-based film that preceded this. And obviously a lot of the same creative team worked from that on Coraline, and the director, Henry Selick, was the director of The Nightmare Before Christmas. And I think you can see that in flourishes throughout both of those films. But as much as I love The Nightmare Before Christmas, I think my heart is with Coraline. I didn't grow up reading this book, and truth be told, I haven't read a whole lot of Neil Gaiman's work, but what I have read really makes me respect the dude, because he continues to tell really great stories and is up there with the likes of Stephen King. Now, obviously, I've got a lot of catching up to do in books of his, but this one, I remember seeing several of my peers read this, either as a classroom assignment or on their own from the library. And the book always intrigued me. The art looks like this. Yeah, kind of creepy, eerie, but approachable for a kid. And let me tell you, that's the same thing that makes Coraline so special to me. I think it's a great first horror film for kids, because it lets them put their toe in the water and figure out if this is kind of going to be their thing or not, but in a safe and approachable way. And the animation is gorgeous, so it gives everyone something to love. But this film isn't just for kids. No, coming-of-age stories have never just been for kids. They've always been approachable from pretty much every angle, and it helps adults reconnect with their childlike selves. And I think that's really well done here in Coraline. As an adaptation, it does change a couple things, like the looks of a lot of characters. Coraline did not have blue hair in the original book, but her iconic look from the movie is kind of what most people think of when they think of Coraline now, with the yellow rain jacket and the blue hair, because it's the first splashes of color that we really see in that movie. Because when Coraline moves into the Pink Palace apartments, her world isn't populated with saturation. It's kind of dull and gray and rainy. Coraline is the splash of life that separates her from everything else. She's different. But she's also having to grow up, because this new move that her parents have had to make in order to continue to work in their field has left her feeling alienated from both her family and from her friends, and she has nothing to latch onto. So when some really messed up stuff starts to happen to her, she has no one to turn to. And much like in Pan's Labyrinth, because I'm going to keep talking about that film for all eternity, this is a very feminine coming-of-age tale. There are things that I think you can see are visually pulling from Del Toro's oeuvre and his visual style. But also they have a couple parallels, both being darker versions of kind of the Alice in Wonderland narrative, I think, that they're pulling from. And the dance of whether or not this is real or not, or a mixture of the two. I think both of these and the original Lewis Carroll text, Alice Through the Looking Glass, do a great job of conveying that and leaning into the mixture of reality and non-reality in childhood. I honestly don't think there's a better place to do that than animation or film, but specifically the way that Coraline captures it through the eyes of Henry Selick and the incredible team at Laika. Now, you've probably seen a couple Laika films. They've been doing quite a few movies over the past couple years. Obviously Coraline, Paranorman, The Box Trolls, and a couple more. These people love making these vibrant worlds full of incredible characters and using animation to reach people around the world. Because animation is something that is easy for children to latch onto and explore deeper and darker themes, whilst also being approachable for adults. Because Paranorman deals with zombies and a town being overrun and is definitely a horror film, much like Coraline. Now, obviously, Neil Gaiman's work has made previous appearances in both movie club and in media prior to this. His famous storyline for the comic book The Sandman is one of the most beloved comic books of all time. I actually have one of his books right here that has previously made an appearance on, I think, second or third episode of Movie Club when I did the Booksmart intro. It's How to Talk to Girls at Parties, which was eventually adapted to a film starring Elle Fanning, this movie's Dakota Fanning's sister. It's kind of interesting to see just how Gaiman's work has been adapted over time. I mean, Gaiman himself has had quite a few big projects in recent years. American Gods, starring this film's Ian McShane and a couple others, is one of the big things right now on television. It's got a ton of great actors and people genuinely love it. After rewatching the movie recently, I was blown away to figure out and just be reminded of the fact that this film captures childhood in such an endearing and beautiful way. Because I think all of us have had childhoods like this. We've done things that now, looking back on them, we are astounded to still be alive. And much like us, Coraline just plunges straight ahead. When she finds a door that's behind the wallpaper of her new apartment, she doesn't just stop there. She asks her mother to cut the door out and find the key so that way she can see what's behind this door. As kids, we felt like we were invincible and that nothing could kill us. And I feel like Coraline has that same idea, at least for most of the movie. And it's incredibly relatable, because not only do we want to know as an audience what's behind that door, what if she makes these decisions, what would happen, we would probably have made those same decisions in many cases if we were Coraline herself. But this is Coraline's story. She's the hero. And no matter what eccentric character she experiences in this wild world of this new place that she's moved into at the Pink Palace Apartments, she's still the center of the story. She's the heartbeat, and in many ways, it's a very feminine coming-of-age story. If you want more information on that, you should read the essay I pointed out in Pan's Labyrinth. It's in the description below. As a kid, I loved going into haunted houses, and as an adult, I now really like watching those Travel Channel ghost story shows. I love folklore and all kinds of stuff like that. Not the Taylor Swift album. I do love that, but that's not what I mean here. I love how stories and superstitions are passed down through generations, and I love ghost stories in general. And in many ways, Coraline feels like this old folklore legend. Even if you're like me, you're a cynic, you don't necessarily believe in ghosts, and you think that most of these shows are just cases of misunderstandings. People seeing things because they want to see something. They want to see ghosts. You can't help but understand them, because we all crave answers to that. Like, what happens after we're gone? And I think the best folklore legends deal with that tension. Now, I could keep talking about the themes and all the things that I appreciate about Coraline, what it does really well, all day, but I'd love to delve into the cast just a little bit real quick. Obviously, Dakota Fanning, who is the star of the film, is fantastic in the role of Coraline Jones, but there's quite a few more great actors behind her, including Terry Hatcher, who plays Mel Jones, Coraline's mother, and John Hodgman, who's a fantastic voice actor in his own right, playing Coraline's dad, Charlie Jones. He has been in a variety of different projects as a voice actor, but he's also been in shows like Community, and he owns his own podcast, Judge John Hodgman, which I love. And of course, one of my favorites is Keith David, who is a fantastic character actor who had some of his best output in the 1980s. And that included John Carpenter's The Thing, which will be screening next month. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies. But he also was in another John Carpenter joint, They Live, which was John Carpenter's rallying cry against Reaganomics and trickle-down economics and how it affects poor people. And it also happens to include a 7-minute fight between Keith David and Rowdy Roddy Piper. You might think I'm joking, but that's not an exaggeration in the slightest. It truly is a 7-minute long fight for no reason over a pair of sunglasses. And I love it. I love it from the bottom of my soul. Obviously, Ian McShane is also in this film as Mr. Bobinski, Coraline's upstairs next-door neighbor, who supposedly owns a mouse circus, though we never see it in the real world. But I also really love Ian McShane in a variety of projects he's been in before, like Deadwood, and you can't forget the most recent John Wick movies. Good Lord, I love those movies, and I love his role in those films. But I would be remiss to also not mention Robert Bailey Jr., who plays Wyborn Lovat, Coraline's really only companion besides the cat in this film. Wyborn is like the only person that reaches out to Coraline in the midst of this move and tries to be her friend, as weird as he is and as weird as she is. And Robert Bailey Jr. does a great job of conveying that. And I love the tete-a-tete between Bailey Jr. and Fanning. Coraline has always been one of my favorite animated films, and I think one of the things that makes it so great is every time I come back to it, I find something new that I love. One of the things I always love about Coraline, I mean, it is one of my favorite animated films, is how many different things are going on under the surface, and just like all the different visual flourishes and the motifs and stuff like that. Like the buttons being sewn over one's eyes, and the connection of eyes being the window to the soul. clearly a lot of thought that's been put into this film, and it's truly a labor of love, because that's the thing about stop motion animation. Every time you look at it, every single frame was touched by human hands and was formed and made and intentionally shot that way. And I think that's something special about this style of animation, and I'm glad that that's the medium that Henry Selick decided to push for. I adore this movie, and I'm glad that we get to share it together tonight. I can't wait to chat with you a little bit more about it a little bit later. But for now, sit back, grab yourself a blanket, and cozy up, because it's about to get spooky up in here for this pre-Spooktober screening. Grab some popcorn and your favorite beverage as we here at Movie Club proudly present a screening of the 2009 Laika Studios animated film from director Henry Selick, based on the novella by Neil Gaiman, Coraline.